All right, I'll call this joint caucus together at 5:33. I'll take roll. For the Republicans, Ms. Crosby,
Here.
Mr. Webster,
Here.
Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena,
Here.
Mr. Fiducia, Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. Butita,
Here.
Mr. Billich, Mr. Schultz, Mr. Booker,
Here.
and I am also here. We've got a quorum of the Republicans. Joe, how about you?
All right. Mr. Salgado,
Present.
Miss Red, I think she's having trouble getting on. She's working on it. Miss Coral. She was here. I'm going to mark her present because she's probably having problems too. Mr. Tassoni,
Present.
Mr. Neighbors, not here. Mr. Fellers, and I see Mr. Girl.
Yep.
So we have quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Mr. Hoffman, rather. Running down the agenda, looks like Mr. Schultz has got the invocation for this meeting on Thursday. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about down to committee reports? We'll jump into standing committee reports, and it starts off with finance, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Obviously, there's two ordinance for bond issuance. One we already talked about is the $4 million for the projects that we currently have with the highway department, Baxter Road, and some other items. This is just to give us access to buy the bonds at any time. Same thing with the second one, which is a $2.6 million. It's kind of like a refinance of the bonds that are currently out there related to that. So just to get better interest rates on the bonds, those are the two things that we are going to approve. The other thing is the ordinance of the mental health. The IRS for the state of Illinois came back. They wanted some language change, so we're adopting to that. So it's just a simple matter of language that's going to get updated. And then the last item is obviously the property tax, tax late penalties that to be waived. I know Mr. Arena is working on that, and hopefully we probably will maybe have a finance committee prior to the actual board so we can actually have a discussion about that. And I don't know, Mr. Arena, if you want to touch in a little bit where you're at. I know I saw some email correspondence going back and forth between Mr. Kerlinkus and Mr. Carpenter. So I don't know if you want to address anything on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. You saw email correspondence going back and forth today?
Yeah, I think you sent it today, or I can't remember, this morning. Just
Right, okay, so I sent something out, but I didn't hear back from them.
Okay.
I did have a conversation with Sue Gorel today about the percent that people would have to make in a partial payment. After my conversation with her, I'm now inclined to go with Mr. Butita's suggestion of 3 payments. Like they can split in 3 payments. They pay a third, and a third. So a third in June, a third the following month, and then the third the next month. This is applying to the first payment only. If it's necessary, I think we could revisit this for the time of the second payment. And the reason, when I talked to Sue, she was saying that she didn't care how much they paid as long as they paid something. And to me, that doesn't really make sense. She also told me that we're talking about approximately $700,000 in interest that's typically collected because of late payments during this period. And I was in the impression it was more like 200,000. So now we're looking at a bigger number. The payments of a third and a third and a third would, I think, lessen the number of people that are using it. And then beyond that, the changes I made this morning were based on the conversation we had in committee. So it cleaned it up some. You know, that's where it's at. I think I've answered the questions that I need to answer. I think at this point, we'd need to have the state's attorney weigh in.
Absolutely. Mr. McDonald, and then one other item is we kind of went through the financials where we project where we're going to end up. I'll have Mr. Chapman submit that to everybody because I don't know if all board members got those documents for that information. So I'll send it over. I'll have Steve forward that information to everyone so they have access to that. And that's pretty much it. That concludes our report, and that's what will be presented on Thursday.
Any other questions for Mr. Salgado? Seeing none, moving over to the zoning committee. Mr. Webster. Don't forget your mute button. There you go.
Okay, sorry. We're gonna have a meeting on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Same style here, Zoom, I guess. So we have 2 items on there, and I think they could definitely be voted on. So they came through zoning board of appeals with approval, unanimous, and both of them did. Kind of no-brainers, I would say. So we'll have that brought forward then again Thursday night.
Excellent. Any questions for Mr. Webster? Seeing none, we'll move on to Economic Development Committee. I don't think Jazz is here. Is there any, there's nothing under the agenda. Is there anything to talk about? No. I see Mr. PD is saying no. Operations. Don't have anything for this week either. Moving right along to Public Works, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman. No report. Our next scheduled meeting will be 5 p.m. on the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. That brings us to Public Safety, Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. I got a couple items here as soon as I can get it turned up here on my phone. There it is. Turn it this way. Okay, I've got a resolution approving subcontractor agreement for the Department of Justice Violence Against Women, fiscal year 15 Justice for Families grant. It is a grant, went through Public Safety Committee. And another resolution authorizing the execution of a first extension of agreement between Winnebago County, Illinois, and Remedies Renewing Lives for the domestic violence mental court technical assistance. And this is also a grant. Both of them are win-win for Winnebago County and doesn't cost us a thing. Are there any other questions on either of those grants?
I have one, Mr. Booker. The violence against women, why is that fiscal year 15?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will have, I suppose there isn't anybody, I don't see Mr. Jakeway on here, but yeah, why is that a five-year-old grant?
Yeah. I just want to make sure it's not something like what we had earlier with the city of Rockford where they were forgetting to pay or whatever. Ms. Crosby, did you have something to add to this?
Yeah, not really, but I think it's a typo.
I think it is too. If Mr. Gus Gettner, you've got to weigh in.
Mr. McDonald, recall the other night, Mr. Jakeway said this was the last year of a 5-year grant. Recall?
Does that sound satisfactory?
A little bit.
I know. It's not solid, is it?
No.
It's the last year of a 5-year grant. And
if you could maybe, Mr. Booker, just chase that down before Thursday.
yeah, I will have an answer to that. And I'll talk to Mr. Jakeway tomorrow.
And yeah, what's that mean? The last year of a 5-year grant, why wasn't that in 15?
Right, exactly.
Or
All right, I agree.
to Mr. Gettner's point, maybe it was 5 years starting in 15 and now it's our last year. But just a clarification would be nice.
Yes, very good. I agree. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Seeing none, we'll move on to Personnel and Policy Committee. I don't think Mr. Fiducia is here. Is anybody here from that committee that can speak to the one resolution? Looks like Jim's looking for the mute button. Here he comes.
And we,
But now I'm
Good.
muted.
go ahead, go ahead, Angie.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That is something that Ann Johns has really researched. It is a very good contract. This is the one that, if you remember a few years ago, we went to Williams Manning for the staff's insurance. And in the meantime, they had sold out to Gallagher. And so what this is actually, it's Gallagher provides us with a consulting firm. And this consulting firm goes over the cost of the drugs that we used. And last year, we used over $2 million worth of drugs. This study is free to us. And they're like I guess you could call them like a broker. They're going to be searching out to see if we can get drugs for our staff at a cheaper price. That's basically what that is.
Some of you, I'm sorry.
Okay? That's about what, I can, but I'm sure that on Thursday night you'll ask Ms. Johns what it's all about and get more clarification on it.
You have anything to add, Mr. Webster?
Yeah, we did discuss this the other night when he, at their committee, and that question came up, and the answer was, as Angie pointed out there, that there's no cost to us, but someone said, I think it might have been Mr. Kelly, I don't know, someone said, we'll pay for it one way or another, and that's true enough. We pay for everything one way or another, but yeah, that was Ann's job to get Gallagher's on the ball to find the best bargain for us. And that's what Gallagher's done. This is not the first year of it. It's been done before.
Excellent. I believe Ms. Arena was the first one to point out the fact that, yes, it's $35,000 and they're going to get it somehow. I agree with you, Mr. Arena. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll move on to a new business. Under new business, item A is 2 appointments for the Chicago Rockford International Airport Board. One's a new appointment, Mike Shablaski. The other one's a reappointment of Tommy Del Santo. Is there any questions or problems or any discussion on these? Everybody's okay? Item B is Winnebago County Board of...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Mr. Ray, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't think this would come up until Thursday.
We're not voting on it right now. This is just discussion.
Well, I don't know if this would be a good time to discuss, but if all of you, is this a paid position on the board?
The agenda says the Chicago Rockford International Airport Board is $150 per month.
So it is a paid position?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I've taken a look at that board, and I'm sure I'm in the process of drafting a letter to the chairman. If you take a look at the makeup of that board, we're not really representing the community. And I think that we need to do that because previously there were 7 men on the board. Now they're down to, I want to say 5. I think we need to change the makeup of that board, and I've spoken with Mr. Haney about that. He's recommending someone that I think might be, I don't agree with recommending your buddies or your friends to positions like that. And I don't want to talk out of position because I don't know who is being recommended. I only know, who did you say that's being recommended?
It's Mike Shablaski and Tom Del Santo. Mike would be a new appointment and Tom would be a reappointment.
I think we need to take a look at some other names before you guys approve of Mike Shablaski. I have nothing against Mike, but we need to look at the makeup and make sure we're representing the community.
Okay.
So what I would like to do is ask that this be laid over until the new chairman takes his seat or her seat.
Okay. So I see Ms. Crosby had her hand up and Mr. Hoffman. So I'll go Ms. Crosby, then Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, just for informational purposes, this wasn't Chairman Haney's choice. this was Mike Dunn's preference. Now, I look at Mike Dunn, you can like him or not, but he has done for this community and that airport, made it the #1 cargo airport in the world, fastest growing. And his first choice is Mike Shablansky.
Okay, let me say this.
I'm
I
not done.
received a call. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I can speak.
I'm not done. So to second guess Mike Dunn, to me is kind of, none of us could have done for Rockford managing that airport that are on this call that Mike Dunn has. I don't care who you are. That guy has been incredibly productive in bringing business to this town. So if Shablansky's Mike Dunn's pick, it's not Frank Haney choosing a friend. It's Mike Dunn preference. I intend to support it. So there I am. Thanks.
May I
I'm
speak,
done.
please? May I speak, please?
You can have a follow-up, Dorothy, then we'll go to Mr. Hoffman.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I received a call from Mike Dunn. So this came from his mouth, that this was Frank Haney's choice. I don't know where you got your information from, Ms. Crosby, but I know where I got mine from. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Red. Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Chairman. I just got a message from Mr. Haney, and he wanted me to pass on that Leslie West is African-American and was recently appointed to that board. Whatever that's worth. I'm just a messenger.
I also received a phone call from Mr. Dunn. Mr. Dunn did request, he thinks the board member being replaced is Pat Deary, a businessman from the area who's moving out of the area. He likes Mr. Shablansky's business knowledge. He was high up at Woodward. He brings a high level of leadership. That being said, nothing can come through without Chairman Haney recommending a name. So I agree with that. But when I spoke with Mr. Mike Dunn, he did indicate to me that Mr. Shablansky was his choice. Is there any other discussion on those, Mr. Webster?
Yes, I wonder on this appointment, was that ever posted for other people to get a chance to interview for that one?
I do not know that answer. I see Mr. Haney's on the line if he can jump in on that, or if anybody else has an answer. I just know that Mr. Dunn called me requesting Shablansky, speaking highly of him, and then Mr. Haney, or Chairman Haney, also called me asking if I was okay with it. I don't know what the rest of the process was there. Any other discussion on the airport appointments? We'll move to the next item B is the Winnebago County Board of Review, reappointing Tom Ewing. Just for Dorothy's information, that compensation is $15,000 per year. I'm not sure whether it's so high, it's really high for the board. Is there any discussion on Mr. Tom Ewing? Ms. Crosby.
This is just a question. I was under the impression he's the chair of the Board of Review, and he's currently at 28,000. So is he coming back as a member, and then they elect him as a chair, or what's that process? Does anybody know?
Jane, I believe that he comes back as a person, and then from the group, they will choose their chairman. I think there's about 3 or 4, there's 4 on that committee, and that committee will choose chairman.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Angie.
Any other discussion on that appointment? See none, we'll move on to item C, Winnebago County Board District 4, the nomination of Brad Lindmark. Is there any discussion on that? And I'll just tell you, last Monday, the Republican caucus met. We did take a vote, and Mr. Lindmark was the pick of the county caucus. So I saw Mr. Hoffman, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Keith. I've been on the phone most of the day with members of my caucus about this pick. And what I was trying to do is keep the Democrats being the people that actually make the difference of which Republican gets what position. It's getting harder and harder for us to do that because we have two sides pushing the Democrats to vote their way. I would request humbly and respectfully for you guys to go back, lay this over, or whatever you have to do, go back and come up with one solid candidate so the Democrats do not have to be the ones who have to make this choice. Ms. Crosby, I don't think she meant it when she said it, but she said the Democrats had their option. We do not have an option. And I don't think she meant that, but I do think that you guys need to come up with a solid choice and let us know who it is so we aren't the ones that making a decision for your party. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Webster.
Yeah, just a quick comment there. It's when just a few minutes ago, when Jane says that we should respect Mike Dunn's choice because, you know, he's a good guy or nice guy or whatever. And I find that kind of an odd comment following on the heels of not following the choice that the Republican Central Committee forwarded a name, as they were bound to do. They forwarded one name to the chairman. And we know that name was Mike Zintek. And so it's just odd there's so much pushback on that nobody wants to respect that name or that process, but we should fall in line when it's somebody else coming up with just one name. So makes no sense. You can't have it both ways. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on that appointment, Ms. Crosby? I'll go Ms. Crosby, then Mr. Kelly.
I just want to say that when it comes to Mike Dunn, as I said, I don't think there's anybody that's on this call that could have done for our community in making that airport hub the fastest growing in the world. Now, when it comes to the Republican Central Committee, they don't have that stature in my eyes. They haven't earned it and they haven't shown it to me. Once they do that and they've earned my respect, I'm easy, but they haven't done that, Jim. And when they cross over that line and they take time to earn my respect, I've gotten one call from them in 4 years. So I'm not high on the Central Committee and their decision-making processes. If they had my respect, it'd be a different story, but they do not. So that's the end of it.
We'll go to Mr. Kelly, then Mr. Webster, and then Mr. Arena. Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, this is a purely political appointment, a very local political appointment. And the tradition has always been previously that indeed, I got to agree with Mr. Webster, and I don't often do that. But I have to agree that what's the way it's been done in the past is respecting the recommendation of the precinct committeeman from within the district. And that is always how it's been done my 8 years on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Gene, I struggle with your statements there because that's a very judgmental statement that you made there about they haven't earned your respect and so forth like that. Well, and nobody's called you in 4 years. Have you ever participated with anything with Central Committee in 4 years? Probably not. But as far as the 4 years goes, the past 4 years, you had a different leadership at Central Committee. You've got new leadership there now. They're just now got appointed after the last election, as the rest of us did, or some of us did, whatever. At any rate, so I think that I think for you to sing the praises of one, but then totally trash the other, I think that's wrong, Gene.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Moving on, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand Mr. Hoffman's point, But I just wanted to bring up that I don't think that this is a matter that we can send back to committee necessarily. It's an appointment by the chairman that we vote either up or down. Unless he withdraws the appointment, I don't know that we have an option other than to vote on it. That's, you know, I may be wrong, but I think if that's going to be a consideration, we need to look into the proper procedure to have another choice to make.
Sure. I'll go to Mr. Hoffman in a second. I'll make a comment. I have no intention of pulling Mr. Lindmark's name, but that's my 2 cents worth. I wouldn't request the chairman to pull his name. Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Keith. I'm not asking you to pull his name, but if I remember right, it was a 5-4 vote, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I believe there's, 11 Republicans?
Yes.
And so I would ask, three people to be gone in such an important vote like that is, to me, is a lot of people. So at the very least, I think we should know what those 3 people felt. Because honestly, I don't know if we can do it, but I'm at the point saying all of the Democrats just abstain from the vote. Because I feel like we're being lobbied by 2 groups of people, and I'm not going to have my caucus torn apart because you guys can't make up your mind. So please get together and give us a name. I don't want to be the one who's lobbying with my group to find a Republican name. I shouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't expect you to do that for me. In fact, I would be ticked if you did. So please, however you have to do it, Keith, give us a solid name, not a 5-4 vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Is there any other discussion, Mr. Webster?
Yeah, one more thing. Joe, when it came to the state's attorney's appointment, we Republicans heard from a lot of our Democrat friends asking us, to support Maryland. And so really this is okay, so it's strictly political, that's correct. But someone's made it terribly personal. And so at any rate, the bottom line is when something came out of your side of the aisle, yes, we all voted on that.
Yeah.
Something comes out of our side of the aisle, yes, we all vote on it. I wouldn't think that we would, at least on my part, I wouldn't ever abstain if something came, a recommendation from your side. I said, hey, I'm good. I'm with that, So that's my feelings on that, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Jim. I don't mean no disrespect to you guys. I respect you guys greatly. You did come to forefront. That is not my point. My point is we have a split group now that can go either way. It isn't just supporting you guys. It's like, we think this person or that person. I would just like, and I think you would agree, I think a 5-4 was a very small portion of the Republicans to choose from. And that's not Keith's fault. That's who showed up. But again, I would say I would just like a more solid number, and so that we don't have to get lobbied. And then we turn around and make the choice. And then we have a group of Republicans that we have to work with upset with us. I know I see that train coming, and I'm trying to head it off. So I would request that you try to follow up somehow. I don't care how you do it, but please give us a more definitive answer than 5-4. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. We had 9 there. So the vote went 5-4 because Schultz wasn't there. Then it would have been a tie, in which case then Keith McDonald would have had to break the tie because the caucus leader does not vote in that unless it's to break a tie. So that's where it would have ended up as a 5-5 tie. And then it would have been up to Keith.
Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hoffman, I appreciate that you were, willing to support whatever the decision was of the Republican caucus. And, we've come up with this divided vote on it. And if in fact we just have to vote this candidate up or down, I would not be offended or angry with you or your caucus members later on if we just agree that everyone votes their conscience on this issue, and however it happens, happens. And later on, if it's not the way I vote, I'm not going to be holding it against any Democrat. This may be one of those circumstances where we just have to vote up or down and let the chips fall where they may. That's just my 2 cents.
Ms. Crosby.
I agree with Mr. Arena. If the vote is for this gentleman or against this gentleman, either way, it's not going to get pulled from the agenda. So Paul is right. The other thing is the Republican Central Committee in November has the right to put their candidate forward of their choice. So the final say in November will be by the Republican Central Committee. So I support what Paul just said. And just, I'm not going to hold it against anybody either. It is what it is. Then either it gets voted up or it gets voted down. So he's correct. Thank you, Paul.
We'll go to Mr. Sony, then Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And like I say, I feel like I'm getting ping-ponged around about this appointment as well. But just what I want, in case someone needs to hear it, we're talking about the Republican caucus, so that's what I'm going to say, the Republican caucus. Without you guys and gals being unanimous on your decision to put someone forth, I doesn't think it sets for a nice future amongst yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sony. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. Back in 2011, Lynn Strathman was the county board representative for District 1. And she was moving out of state, and she did some research, and she approached me and asked me if I would take her seat if she got enough support for it. And I said, well, I'd have to think it over. And within 48 hours, I let her know that I would like to take that over. And of course, she informed me that there would be a process through the precinct committeeman, but she had also advised me that several of the residents in our district was in favor of what she wanted to go with, and that was with me. Well, the 3 precinct committeemen had chosen someone else for that seat, and they went forward with it. The board went forward with it, and I advised them that I will run for that seat and I'll win, and I did, and I won overwhelmingly because that's who the citizens wanted, but also the representative wanted me to fulfill her seat as well. But anyway. I know I won't be budging from the vote that I made at caucus, and we made a vote at caucus, and that's how the process goes, and you move forward with that vote. So I know for sure there won't be a unanimous vote, and again, I just like the process. Had my selection been moved forward or not moved forward, I would have accepted who the caucus majority went with. So that's where I stand on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Is there any other discussion on this appointment? See none. Is there any other business for this evening for the joint caucus? Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also considering what we can do as a Republican caucus or a joint caucus, but at the very least as a Republican caucus. I'd like to move forward and with an endorsement to open Winnebago County for business. I know we can't supersede what the state of Illinois, the governor of the state of Illinois, his rules, whether they're right or they're wrong. But I'd like to move forward with a public endorsement on opening Winnebago County. So if I can bring that up in the board meeting, if it's improper or proper, I don't know. But I want to move forward, and I know I've already been told I'll get a second on my motion to open Winnebago County, an endorsement anyway by the Winnebago County Board, and it's something I think we should go public with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. I strongly agree. We need to make steps to move forward. I don't know that just opening the way we were February 1st is the right thing to do, but I do think we need to have a more proactive approach on how to move forward. I've spoke with at least Mr. Butita and I think Mr. Reen about, we'd like to have a medical professional with us. That way it's not just us elected officials that really aren't medically qualified to say, to measure our benchmarks. But so far that's been the trick, is find somebody in the medical field that's willing to sit with us and maybe go against what their medical system might be providing for them. But I do agree with you. I think we need to have a strong voice and make reasonable steps to recovery. I saw Ms. Crosby and then Mr. Kelly.
And I want to make a comment too.
Okay, Ms. Goro, I'll go to you right after Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
Just wanted to add to that. I'm pretty tied to the private business community, and bankruptcies are already beginning. I talked to a restaurant owner today that is going to file bankruptcy on their LLC on Friday. And it's going to be a real domino fall, guys. It's coming. And these guys cannot function. Even if they open, they can't put enough people in the restaurant to make a profit. So we're going to see a huge decrease in that service around our community. And a lot of people have invested their hard sweat and their entire savings into what they're doing, and it's all going to go down the chute. So I'm in very much support of what you just said, Aaron, and I thank you.
I know Aaron was reached out by one of his constituents over the weekend. Something as simple as a grant process that the state of Illinois has. And every other county in the state of Illinois has a contact name and number on who to contact this program. Every county with the exception of Winnebago County. So I know she'd reach out to myself and Mr. Booker to try to figure out who it is she needs to talk to and what she needs to do to move forward with the salon. Do you want to follow up on that, Mr. Booker? Then I'll go with Mr. Kelly.
Yes. Now, this is a horrible, horrible, horrible disaster. But the governor has laid out parameters in his stay-at-home order as to how we're supposed to proceed, and is charging our local health department, our Winnebago County Health Department, with implementing that. And I think we need to kind of work within that framework. Otherwise, we're going to have lawsuits again.
I understand your point, Mr. Kelly. I don't think anything we do would be set in stone or actionable, but we can at least show our support to the health, Dr. Martello, the Winnebago County Health Department, and say, this is the direction we feel Winnebago County needs to go. Mr. Booker and then Mrs. Gordon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was on the phone with Chris Dornbush today to try to get some answers, some resolution to the small business owners that have been contacting me. These small business owners are in contact with the State of Illinois Office of Regional Economic Development and the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Development. But Mr. Dornbush advised me that due to the shortage in their office, they're somewhat handcuffed. He's trying to wear 5 different hats at the same time. And they've got some new people in the state office. So they're trying to iron things out. And Steve Chapman's getting involved in it tomorrow to see if we can satisfy these the survival of these small businesses in our community. But I just don't want the governor to judge the entire state of Illinois based on the numbers that Chicago is producing. That's it's absurd when the number of cases in Chicago are 76,000 and the number of cases in the rest of the state of Illinois are at 5,000. That's just not that's unbalanced, and we've got to do what we can. I mean, when you drive by Meijer and Woodman's and Home Depot and see these parking lots just jam packed, it's absurd that the small businesses, the tile companies, the blacktoppers, the hair salons just can't open, and that's ridiculous. We're adult enough. These people are adult enough to enforce safety protocols within their businesses as well. So I just wanted to let everybody know that Chris Dornbush is a contact guy. Bear in mind that he's busy as heck. He's running in 5 different directions. So he's doing the best that he can. Thank you.
Mr. Booker, I'll push a joke at you because you're endorsing hair salons with your current haircut. But Mr. Coral.
Have any of you looked at the Winnebago County Health Department website? How many of you have listened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to our local radio, our TV channels when Dr. Martell is there? Have you talked with the mayor of Rockford to see where his stand is? Are we talking about unincorporated Winnebago County, or are we talking about all of Winnebago County, including our villages and our cities? There's a lot out there that we have to take in consideration. We are already going into our 3-step program. There's a 5-step program, and we are now entering the 3rd step of that program. So before you start making more comments, you really should see where we are standing, because there's going to be some more opening up. But you need to go listen to Winnebago County. It starts about, I don't know, 3:15, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on all of our public channels. But again, go on our website for Winnebago County Health Department and see what they're saying, because we can't let this thing just blow open and just blow it open. It has to be in a step process, little by little by little. And people are already getting prepared for the next part that's going to be opening up within their workforce. So it's an interesting process. I do ask you to take more look at it, because if I was in business, yes, I would want to go back to work today. But if I go back to work today and have all these people come in and I help sit back and we have a relapse, we're out even further. So I want to get this over as soon as possible, and I want to continue to go with the 5-step program. And if you talk to the gentleman from the READC, he also has, they also have been talking to manufacturers on how they should start slowly opening up their industries. There's more to all this, and you all need to take a deeper look. Just don't listen to what people who don't know what's going on really, except for they want this over and done with. It isn't going to get over and done with. We could actually put a relapse on it. Think carefully what you're saying and what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coral. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this? Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to echo pretty much what Angie said, but I also want to comment. I read the Facebook entries, and some people that are making comments that are very dangerous and are not following any of the science. And Rockford and Winnebago County was declared a hot spot less than a week ago. And now and every place that I know of that has opened up, the rate of infection has gone up. So, yes, we need to do some of these things, but I agree with Angie. We have to be careful. We all want it open, but let's not get carried away here. I mean, we're over 80,000 people now dead. And a salon, I think it was Ms. Crosby said that these places aren't going to do a lot of business anyway because people aren't going out to them. My son lives in Florida. Nobody's going out to the restaurants in Florida. So I'm just saying, be careful what you wish for. And when you enter on Facebook, check your facts. Just don't write stuff that you don't follow up on.
Sure.
Thanks.
I avoided Facebook from Tuesday to Saturday this past week just because I've had enough of the crap. Mr. Haney, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just real quick, just for where we're at now, our healthcare capacity is stable in our region. Our percent of positive tests out of 100 are below the 20% public health marker. Our public health metrics are in line with us moving forward to that phase 3 at the end of May. If you look at what opens up, then when we go into phase 3, it is a lot of retail with social distancing that is currently closed. So some of those small businesses that many of us are concerned about do get addressed. I believe barbershops, again, bald guy talking about a barbershop, they open up in phase 3. There's 3 things, and this is my opinion. I'm not speaking for anybody on the board. I'm not speaking for Mayor McNamara or any other mayor or Sandy Martell. My opinion, there's 3 glaring gaps in phase 3. We do need, and I think there's a safe way to move to some percentage of opening on a capacity basis for restaurant dining. There's a wrong way to do it and there's a right way to do it. And I just think there's going to be some discussion by business owners on, is there a right way, get a plan around that. Second, as a person of faith, as flawed as I am, I think people need church. And the fact that we can go buy weed and go to a liquor store, but we can't go to church in phase 3 on a percentage basis of the overall capacity of the building, that does, I struggle with that. I think that needs to be looked at. The third is a percentage basis of fitness centers. I don't think people need to be stacked on top of each other, sweating on each other. I think that's dangerous. But I wonder for people who have fitness shops, if you can be spaced up appropriately, have proper cleaning protocols. I think there's ways to look at that in a thoughtful way, but this is some dangerous stuff. We're all concerned about that. Anybody advocating for business, I know nobody's anti-public health, and people that are concerned about public health, I know are not anti-business, but this is a grinder. So if anybody ever wants to talk about that, I am hearing, Mr. McDonald, you have the concern about there must be some website that doesn't have a county contact for that small business issue that Mr. Booker referenced. That needs to be corrected immediately, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I'll let you guys get back to your discussion, but those are things I'm hearing, those 3 items in phase 3 as immediate things we could talk about, that there's a wrong way to do that that's dangerous, or maybe there's a right way to do that that's sensible, pragmatic, safe, but also gives some business owners relief because they're getting absolutely crushed. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll cut out then.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this?
Yes, I'd like to respond to the chairman, please.
Yes, Ms. Coral.
I want to thank him. Every day he's on television also telling us about what's going on in Winnebago County. I know he's been very diligent with this all the way through, and he's very sincere in what he is saying. And we continue to work as a group between the city, the county, the chairman. And Mr. Chairman, do you remember the gentleman from READC when he was talking about, and they might have something on their site, I don't know, of how they want industry to ease back into opening up their doors. Do you remember that at all, Chairman?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're working with folks on a couple different levels, but like I talked to Mr. McDonald about this because he's a manufacturing guy. They've worked with manufacturers around safety protocols that are very specific to applications and manufacturing. And the CDC puts out stuff like that, the state health department. There's a lot of, I guess it is the combination of talking to experts. I'm not in the weeds on all that, but it's very needed. There's a safer way and a less safe way in some cases for all businesses. And this stuff isn't going away until there's a vaccine, which is probably going to be a hell of a long time. So we got to learn to live with it safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Anybody else have their hands up? Any other discussion for this evening? How about a motion to adjourn? Ms. Crosby, seconded by Mr. Booker and Mr. Hoffman. All those in favor, signify